wishing you a wonderful 2023. We are finally here at a new year, and welcome to this webinar today. I hope your year started off fantastic. And with this webinar, I'm going to do a quick introduction for Mike. He's going to teach us everything he knows about strategic planning. And then right at the end, if there's time, we will do a live Q&A. So in 1999, Mike invested in Mugg Bean and joined up with Ben. He took on the role of the business manager, developing and implementing the French control processes and growing the profitability of the business end of the brand. After opening a total of 126 stores in South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, the brand also expanded to the international market. In 2009, they sold Mugg Bean to Famous Brands. But when I met Mike for the first time, he told me that selling Mugg Bean is his biggest regret. And I was really surprised by that. And when I asked him why, he said, money isn't everything. He really thrives in that messiness of finding strategic solutions to overcome obstacles that hindered the next growth for Mugg Bean. So today, Mike offers business mentorship to companies, sharing his wealth of knowledge to help other businesses thrive. He wrote a book called Been There, where he shares a story of where it all began and shared really valuable insights into building a great brand. Now, Mike's mentorship is really helping us at PropCon make the right key decisions for our own business. He taught Lawrence and I how important it is to have brand credibility, and so that you can do what you do better than the competitors and operate from a place of excellence because you have passion for what you do. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Mike here on board with us today. Awesome. Hi, Mike.
Good morning, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Leandre. Nice to be with you today.
Thank you.
I trust my picture's not that grainy. I do see that it is a bit grainy, but, for the first time in many, many decades, we have to deal with third-party or external factors such as load shedding and all the other good stuff. And as South Africans, we learn to work around these things, but they don't always pan out perfectly. So if my video view is a little grainy, I trust my audio is good because it's not what I look like, it's what I know that I need to share with you today. So what I'll do is please let me get straight into the message that I would like to share with our viewers today, and that is making your dreams a reality. Making your dreams a reality. I always dreamed big. I'm going to share 3 parts of this principle with you, and this will sincerely help you to make your dreams a reality. But let me start with a little story. Everybody loves a story, and let me just tell you of how we started Mugg Bean. My first boss was Ben Malta. I walked into the Balalaika Hotel one morning as a student, just graduated from the hotel school, and standing right next to me was a huge man, larger than life character, in a morning suit. And they introduced me to him. It was his first day as general manager at the Balalaika and my first day as a student manager. So we immediately had something in common. And from that day onwards, we built a friendship that would be lifelong. But nevertheless, Ben started Mugg Bean in 1996. And I saw Mugg Bean in 1998 when he was opening his 3rd store in Killarney Mall. And I bumped into Ben there, and I actually bumped into him on purpose. I went to see him. And I said to him, Ben, I've seen your brand. And your brand, I personally believe, has a lot of capability. Him and I had kept together, and we kept in touch with one another, but we didn't see one another frequently. What I'd been doing up until that particular point was I founded a company called Freedom Catering Services, and we started off in Johannesburg, in Alberton, in fact. And we built Freedom nationally, right throughout South Africa and into Namibia. And at that point in time, we were actually feeding the troops in Somalia, the American troops that were coming in to help with the defense of Somalia. So we were international. And that was my background. And Ben said to me, but that's quite an achievement. So I said, yes, but I would like to invest in Mugg Bean. I think Mugg Bean has got legs. I asked him, I said, what is your view and your vision for Mugg Bean? And let me just give you a little bit of his background. During that same time, and that time span was about 16 years, he had opened 43 different restaurant concepts, which is almost one every 3 months. So what he would do is he would open a concept, lose interest in it, and the concept would close. The only one of those that ever remained was Mugg Bean. He said to me, well, my brother and I are partners in Mugg Bean. So what I'll do is you can buy my brother out. He wants to retire. So I got the capital together and purchased his brother out of Mugg Bean. And we had our first meeting. And he said to me, but Mike, what are your views? What do you think we can do with Mugg Bean? And I said, Ben, based on your ability as the art of Mugg Bean, I can bring the commerce of Mugg Bean to the table. I know how to expand and grow businesses throughout the Republic of South Africa and a little bit of the international market. And I think that we can duplicate that with Mugg Bean. So he said to me, well, where do you think we'll go? I said, well, a minimum of 80 stores. So he said, what were you smoking before you came to this meeting? And I said to him, Ben, jokes aside, I believe that's a reality. But the first thing that we've got to do is the 3 restaurant concepts that you've opened subsequent to the launching of Mugg Bean, we need to close. I said, if you and I focus our skills on this particular brand, we can create a sustainable brand. So with a lot of reluctance, he closed those 3 stores, sold them off, and we began to concentrate on Mugg Bean. And the first thing that I did for Mugg Bean was start to put structures in place. He'd opened 3 stores. He'd got a concept. All he had really was a menu and a couple of recipes, which his wife Judy had completed for the brand. And I said, well, that's a great start, but I think we need some structure. And the structure came in the form of a strategic plan. And that is my message to you today. I'm going to show you the value and give you a lot of insight into how to construct a strategic plan for yourselves and for your companies. And secondly, I want to give you an insight into the detail that a strategic plan needs to contain. So right now, in most companies, what we're doing is we are preparing budgets for the coming year. Now, in my opinion, I found that budgets are not good enough. All budgets do is give us a financial plan. And the financial plan is all very well, but what happens to the financial plan is after sort of month 3 of the new financial year, you'll find the financial plan is sort of shelved in the bottom drawer of each and every individual in the organization. And yes, they know roughly what their targets are, etc., for the month. And the one thing that they do always know about is the expenditure, and they always underestimate their own personal expenditure. But nevertheless, they've got this budget, and the budget is in the bottom drawer, and life goes on. I say no. Let's develop a strategic plan A strategic plan that is individualized, a strategic plan that suits you, and a strategic plan that suits the organization. And what we do is we put the strategic plan in place. The strategic plan contains all the work and effort and things that need to be done in order to make the financial plan a reality. So we prepare the strategic plan alongside the financial plan, and I like doing it quarterly. I find that what I do is I do a rough plan for the entire year, a rough strategic plan, and then on a quarterly basis, what I do then is I like to revise it, because we're all human. And I find that a strategic plan, especially put together this time of the year, is you've got a lot of energy. You've just come back from a little bit of a break. You like to stretch your goals. You like to put your wish list down. And then reality sets in, and some of the economic factors that we haven't taken into account materialize. And then our strategic plan begins to go off track. We find that we're not meeting its objectives, and we're not meeting what we need to do in terms of the strategic plan. So what I like to do is I like to build an element of flexibility into it, so that at the end of each quarter, what we can do is we can revise the strategic plan. So if you have a look at the construction of a strategic plan, and this is perhaps where you need to take notes, there are three parts to it. The first part is, of course, the financial plan. So in preparing a financial plan, and I always believe that a holistic financial plan, one has to take into consideration the following factors. It has to be realistic, but there are external factors that determine the realism of this plan. And that first reality is, what are the income needs? We all know about expenditure. So what I start with is I start with the expenditure needs. I'm thinking foremost and uppermost in my mind, I'm thinking about the income needs, but the things that I know, that sit on my bank statement every single month are the expenses. What I'd like to suggest is that as you start with the expenditure process, you list the expenditure and you list it by item. And if you need a template for this entire exercise, let me just tell you that this is not a 15-page exercise. It can all be done on one page on an Excel spreadsheet, and it can be done by month. All it needs to do is it needs to detail your expenditure quite carefully. You've got administration costs, you've got marketing costs, you've got fuel, you've got wages and salaries in there, you've got office rent. All of those items make up your expenditure needs for the year. So start now with January and February and say to yourself, these are my 2 trial months in order to make sure that I get my strategic plan for March to end of February 24, that I get that right. List the expenditure that you expect in January, list the expenditure that you expect in February, and have a look at the income that you need in order to cover your expenditure in these 2 particular months. And this will be critical to define your strategic plan, the financial aspect of it going forward. When one looks at the income side, the one particular point that I really and truly would like to encourage you is, don't limit yourself. Take last year's income as a guideline for yourself, but don't stick to that. The tighter the economy becomes, and this year is going to be a tough year globally in the economy arena, in every single country, every single nation that exists. All of the European nations are going to be rebuilding what's happening in the Ukraine, and America needs to sustain itself throughout this. China needs to sustain itself, and South Africa tends to follow the trend of China. purely and simply because we're part of the BRICS concern, and the economic outcomes are not looking good. In fact, people are talking about growth of 1% and 2%, and if you're optimistic, they're talking about growth of 3%. I say in your industry and in the real estate industry in which I mentor, that's out of the window. We can't survive on that. We have to be looking at a growth rate of at least between 10 and 20% on what we did last year. And there's a great reason for that, because as economy becomes tighter, so families look to move their expenditure. They're looking at reducing expenditure. So while probably 80% of the South African population will be looking to reduce their living costs, starting with housing, which is probably the biggest single line of expenditure in their budgets, they may be looking towards either restructuring their bonds, or that 80% would be looking to perhaps downscaling. The other 20%, those are people that perhaps are opportunists or operating in real estate or operating in the investment arena. They will be looking to acquire properties from those that are looking to sell. So we're going to have getting stock should not be a great problem this year. There are always industries that are thriving, and there are industries that are lagging in any type of economy. The only factor that stands in between the real estate not exceeding last year would be the interaction with banks and the availability of finance. So I genuinely believe that we're going to have a bumper year, and I think that you should be planning in that direction. Let's start then with the strategic plan, because we've now discussed the financial plan. You've listed your expenditure, and you've taken a flyer at the income. In other words, how many properties you need to sell, at what kind of value, and what kind of commission that you're going to receive for the sale of those properties. And you've set that all out. And in front of you, you now have a financial plan. What we then now need to do is we now need a plan which will enable you to meet that. The first thing that you need to do is you need to examine your ratios. When I say ratios, I normally look at a typical sales process. So how many calls do I need to make in order to get my stock levels to where they are? How many visitations? Now, when I say calls, I'm not really talking about telephone calls. I'm saying some of them are going to be telephone, some of them are going to be interaction, and a lot of them are going to come off my database. So in looking at your ratios, it's how many calls or how many interactions do I have in order to get stock? And then the ratio of, now I've got stock, and how long does it take me, or how many interactions do I have with potential buyers in order to sell that particular property? And that defines the work that needs to be done in order to have a proper strategic plan. You should have, at this particular point in time, a database. Every agent that I've spoken to has some form of a database. The first thing that you should be doing with your database is putting it on PropCon. Get hold of PropCon. It's highly affordable. It is the absolute ideal database from which to work off. Not only has it been designed by South Africans for South Africans, but they're also right here to help you with any problems or any challenges that you find on the system. And the database is going to be the key to your entire selling drive this year. You need to look at two specific factors. The first one is how to expand my database. In other words, how frequently am I reviewing my database? I'm looking at my stale customers, I'm looking at my regular customers, and I'm looking for new customers. So they tell me in the real estate industry that the cycle of sale of property in a normal residential area is around 4 years. They say between 4 and 5 years, a family will relocate. They will put their property up for sale. Yes, of course, there are families that will stay there for 10 and 20 years. But by and large, in the market that we live in today, which is an evolving and a developing country, most people have a career path. And as their career path grows, they tend to grow their property portfolio. In other words, they sell a smaller house, the family gets bigger as they can afford more children, and as their affordability increases, they then buy a bigger property. And they tell me that cycle is between 4 and 5 years. So your database should be attending to that, and PropCon has that kind of facility with reminders on you, to you, in order to be able to use that database effectively and carefully. The second thing you need to do is you need to concentrate on relationships. Relationships are, like the restaurant industry, prime to your industry. In fact, you possibly cannot operate your business without forming relationships and taking into account the 4-year cycle and taking into account the fact that people move. So you continually need to be visiting your area, the area that, or the region that you've been given to sell in order to find out what's happening, in order to be able to regenerate and replace and grow your database. Because the bigger the database, the more likely you are to increase the number of sales that you can make in a specific year. Don't forget that primarily, as you're growing your database, you're making new friends, you're forming new relationships, and you need to keep in touch with them. And touch is the key word here. We need to touch our database and our client base frequently. And PropCon, once again, is the ideal platform. That's how we built Mugg Bean. We had a strategic plan. We knew exactly what our capability was. We knew and what we were doing is we were opening 15 stores per year, and we were then working on the brand itself in the background. Today, 27 years later, Mugg Bean has taken out all of its competitors. It had 5 competitors. It had Cafe Dolce, Cafe Rossini, House of Coffees, Brazilian, and I forget, Wiesenhof. They all no longer exist except for Wiesenhof, which has a couple of outlets in hospitals. So what had happened was the strategic plan that I put in place with Ben in the beginning, and which Famous Brands took over once they acquired Famous Brands. By the way, Famous Brands have adopted my strategic planning process throughout all of their brands, and they have 26 brands. So strategic planning is the one tool that is absolutely essential for you if you have dreams. And I end off there by saying, keep your dreams a reality. And the way to keep your dreams a reality is, number one, a strategic plan. And to keep your strategic plan in place, number 2, PropCon. Thank you for allowing me to address you this morning. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I trust that you've learned something from me today. Blessings to you all for this year.
Thank you, Mike. This was such a powerful session. I was there in the chat section and people were loving what you were sharing. Yes, so this is the section now where we are here to answer some questions.
While we're waiting for questions, could I possibly answer how we got that regularity in Mugg Bean?
Yes.
The regularity, we decided that the interaction in Mugg Bean, the people interaction, was going to take place between the waiter and the customer, our client. And so what we did was, unlike any other restaurant, is we specialized in restaurant training the waiter in order to be able to engage intelligently with the customer. And so while our estate agents that we're talking to today and our friends need to engage with their particular clients frequently, that is the absolute key to forming the relationship and growing the relationship, because as you form relationships, you get referrals. And as you get referrals, you get more referrals. And that's exactly how we grew Mugg Bean.
Very basic plan. I think for referrals as well, it's those personal service. That's what we want to help you all with at PropCon. It's a tool for you to communicate, stay in touch, personalize your communication. That is the thing that really will authentically grow your business. So having a look at some of the questions, Mike. One is, what happens if your strategic plan rapidly, if somebody like a company owner has a strategic plan and their sales force, their agents rapidly increases, exceeding the original strategic plan targets, what do you do?
Well, we actually faced that problem, because what happened is, when we first did our first strategic plan, we decided to open 2 restaurants, 2 Mugg Beans that year. And we knew that that was our capability. So our capability was also, I mean, we had a development department and they had to actually build the stores. And right at the end, you know, our absolute max was 15 stores a year. So in facing that particular problem, that's a nice problem for an estate office to be able to deal with. I mean, we know that the income is going to be there. What we need to do is we need to increase our prospecting capability. Number one, purely and simply because agents need stock to sell. And if we're not prospecting, we don't have the stock in order to be able to take on more agents. So ahead of taking on more agents, my advice would be increase your prospecting possibility, your capability, so that you have the stock on hand in order to bring more agents on board.
Makes 100% sense. So if I also, it was news to me, I didn't listen to this, your session before today. And it makes sense to me, even with our business, to have a financial plan, knowing what our expenses is in a month, personal expenses, I assume, together with business expenses, combination of that, and have it be real and true. Because I think with budgeting, you sometimes guesstimate and it's not always factually correct, but having those numbers, and then from there, if you know what your X amount is that you need in a month, working it back to say how much money, how many sales I need to generate, and that is your strategic plan.
That's quite correct.
And then if the 2 doesn't match up, would you then just increase your numbers in strategic plan? If you don't match up with your financial goals, do you then make the tweaks on the quantities that you have in your strategic plan?
Okay. The one challenging factor that one has in the real estate business is the time frame. As I said, from offer to commission landing in the office, I was looking realistically at sort of 3 months. So one needs at all time to be working on your strategic plan or reviewing your strategic plan in the real estate business, knowing that whatever steps you take are only going to take action in terms of the income line 3 months from now. So in preparing your strategic plan in real estate, the first point of advice that I'd like to give is perhaps overdo or overthink the income line.
All right.
And prospect purely and simply because of the time frame involved. It's only going to materialize in 3 months' time, whatever action you take. So overestimation and overwork on that side is definitely going to bring rewards either way. That's a win-win situation.
Makes 100% sense. And what I really loved hearing from your feedback is the prospect for the real estate market this year, because all of us are looking at what's happening globally, wondering how it's going to affect us. But very much like Mugg Bean, where it's in the food industry, being in the housing industry is similar. People need to eat and they need to have a place to sleep. So it doesn't matter what the market does, there's always going to be movement there, but if you differentiate yourself, you'll be the one that gets the bulk of that business.
There are always buyers. And so there are always people who have been frugal with money And they know that property, while property isn't the quickest growing investment out, it's the most stable investment. Your return on property should be somewhere in the region of between 6 and 10% per annum. And that should be the growth rate. And that's been kept up through decades. It varies in good economic times and in bad economic times. So I see that there's going to be a lot of stock available. You're going to have families that cannot afford their living costs. And so I see a bumper year coming along. I see stock. You're not going to have to spend too much time on looking for stock. I think stock is going to be fairly freely available this year. And in surprising areas, don't believe that the middle class is just the middle class. You're going to find some middle class families that have been hamming it or shamming it, and they can't really afford their costs. And it's going to be in every single area of the market. It's going to be at the upper end, it's going to be in the middle, and it's going to be in low-cost housing. I see low-cost housing as being very stable this year, and I see us running out of the upper class. We're going to have plenty of stock to sell.
That's wonderful. That feedback also ties into the next question, Mike. So one of the agents asked, what did you do with Mugg Bean to make that brand stand out for marketing, that differentiating yourself from competitors? If you can share some insight on that, you're really valuable.
Well, I actually preempted that question in the shower this morning. So just to be human, is I said to myself, how much money did we actually spend on marketing? Well, the answer is bugger all. We spent no money on marketing, Mugg Bean. We spent all marketing in store. We knew that we wouldn't have a big enough budget to go on to the national side and the national billboards. In fact, in the entire history of Mugg Bean, there was only one TV ad ever made. And that was right at the end of the career. We made a Mugg Bean ad, Ben and myself, just before we sold it to Famous Brands, about the two little boys that were baking in the kitchen as two little friends. And they were helping their mom bake in the kitchen. And, that was the source and the key to how we marketed Mugg Bean. We marketed Mugg Bean through the interaction between our staff in the Mugg Bean stores, building a regular clientele for themselves out of the people that operated in the local neighborhood, getting them out of their homes and working in their homes into working in Mugg Bean, which doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And nowhere else in the world do you see people with computers sitting in a restaurant, drinking 4 cups of coffee throughout the day and not being thrown out. So that was the first part. We created what was called a third space. So you had office, you had work, and then a third space, which was a more casual environment in which I could work. So that was the first thing. And then the most important one was the aspect that you've already mentioned, and that was generosity. We wanted to give everybody the impression, if you walked through the door of Mugg Bean, you were going to get more value than you were paying for. In other words, you were going to get value for money. And that came from my side. My side was, up until Ben and I got together and put together the concept of Mugg Bean, I felt that every single restaurant that I walked into, I was being shortchanged. I was paying and I wasn't getting what I was paying for. And that developed bottomless coffee. You can have as many coffees as you want for one payment. What did it cost us? We thought that what was going to happen in the South African greedy environment was, the average South African was going to drink 55 cups of coffee and pay once. But the answer is 2.3. We discovered that people would pay and they would only have 2.3 cups of coffee because then they were full. And that promoted the area of generosity. And you can do that in any industry. All you need to do is find some product related to your industry that offers more value than what you're paying for. And I would say that is a unique differential that nobody else in the real estate industry is doing right now. Find something unique that you can be sharing with your clients that offers them more value than what they're paying for.
So that is really an awesome concept. And one of the agents here said she's experienced the personal touch by the waiter that serves her at Mugg Bean. And that is a great strategy. something that I remember from your book also is you guys thought of the concept of having the bakery in the front end of Mugg Bean, not behind in the kitchen. And I remember that you had to go through a lot of regulatory red tape in order to be able to have it there. You had to have a counter in front of it just for safety. But when I read it and I went to Mugg Bean, I noticed that it's apart from the fact that it looks different than in other coffee shop, you also get the smell of the freshly baked goods. And watching somebody fluffing the lemon meringue right there in front of you is a magical experience. And I think that's also something that you guys did really well.
What I liked about that, and that area came from Ben. He said, what we need to do is and he called it food theater.
Food theater.
And I think that is an absolutely apt name for that, food theater. So we wanted to create some interaction with customers, and you're not allowed to do it because of the health regulations all over the world. But nevertheless, we managed to twist a health inspector's arm, and he passed the first store like that. And once the first store was passed, we then everybody else in the health department said, but this is okay. Number one, it's safe, and nobody's getting hurt, nobody's getting burnt, and it's quite enjoyable. So we also got them to come to Mugg Bean. So most of the health departments you'll find and government officials that work in local municipalities use Mugg Bean as their regular. I know it certainly happens in my Mugg Bean in Krugersdorp.
Yes. I think you still have that Mugg Bean that you own, the one store.
Yes. Now, yes. But what I was thinking while I was answering that question is how do we translate that into the real estate industry? And
Yes.
I would think that one does that by creating value around the properties that you sell. So in other words, to take a typical family as a case study and say, right, in the last 12 years, because most real estate companies have been going for some time, we've managed to position this family as such in a 2-bedroom apartment. They then went to a 3-bedroom home and had 2 children. In the next 5 years, they ended up, and then finally they ended up staying in Morningside, or in my area, perhaps Meyersdal, which is the top LSM area. And to follow a family pattern, how you as a real estate agent have added value and been able to assist them in increasing their family values. And to put some of those case studies out so that any new business or any of your clients notice that you have been a part of their success and you've been a part of their value add throughout a number of years. Your agency has been an agency that has helped them and assisted them in finding the right properties and adding value to their lives.
In my 10 years selling properties, Mark, showing people countless homes, I always felt like my job as an agent is to listen to my clients and to show them as many homes as I can that relates to what they're looking for. But one thing I couldn't get enough of is people buy a feeling. And when they walk into that house and they get that starry gaze where they like, this is the place, it just never got old. It's something that fueled me constantly, being able to not just do it for the money, but really being able to revel in helping people finding those homes that are their next step, like upscaling or downscaling or getting an investment. That magical vibe that they emanate when they see their home, never gets old.
Can I possibly just share the last thing with you? And that is that, and this is a shocking fact, and I should have concentrated a little bit more about it in my message. In the last 5 years, and I've shared this fact with you, I've bought and sold 6 properties, and I never used the same agent for any one of the 6. I never used the same agent twice.
Interesting.
Now, to the industry, that should be a shocker, because none of the agents that I used ever bothered to form a relationship with me. Well, that happened to me, and I put that as a challenge to all of our viewers today. I'm your worst customer or your worst nightmare. None of the agents ever formed a relationship with me. And I'm not a difficult person to form relationships. I'm a people's person. And no one bothered to do that with me. And so for each of the sales, I used a different agent. And, it's exactly the opposite of the message that I brought to you this morning. But I'm the worst example. And take that example, take note of it, because that is happening in your area right now, I can guarantee you, because of the lack of relationship building.
If one agent built a relationship with you, they would have in essence gotten 6 sales, and most
100%.
likely. So I think
One a
that's
year, in fact.
If I ask you, what could an agent have done better to build a relationship with you, if you speak from a client point of view?
They weren't keeping in touch with me. So they, as I said in my example earlier, a family prospers, and some families prosper quickly, and some families don't prosper quickly. We were prospering, and so my need for expanding my home was there and then. We weren't having more children, but I wanted a better home in a better area. So I used to drive past and say, look, I like this. Have a look at what boards were outside, or if there wasn't a board outside, I used to say, well, somebody must be in charge of this. Is it on the market? Find out for me who the agent is, and I'll start dealing with the agent. And strangely enough, Alberton is a small community, so I know half the agents personally in the area.
Then a lot of people, Mike, are asking about where they can get hold of you, where they can get your book. Do you have, should I just send them your email address or contact number? What do you prefer?
Look, I prefer to be contacted by email, because then we have a record of our conversation. I don't mind if people phone me. And what I do is when I reply to your email, you'll have my phone number on the bottom. So let's say by email, and it's a very, very simple email. My last name, my surname is Maree. It's French background, M-A-R-E-E. So it's mareehome, and the word home, mareehome @mweb.coza. It's a very, very simple email address. And I answer every single email.
For fellow agents as well. Roadshows, pamphlet drops, etc. Do you still do that? Is it still viable? What do you do to get noticed? She believes a big part of the strategic planning is getting your name and brand out there. Any tips, Mike, that you have for real estate agents for getting them noticed out there?
All right. As I say, the only thing that I can pick up on is what estate agents are doing in my area. And there's nothing new. What they're doing is they have boards up, and what they tend to do is they take those same boards out onto the pavements, out onto strategic street corners over weekends. I don't know whether they've got council permission to do that or council permission not to do that. And then I also see in some occasions in the smaller malls, I see boards that are going up that estate agents have obviously paid in the common areas to sell properties. Now, that has been more recent, and I would think that that's a great opportunity. Most agents are area bound. So you have a regional mall, and I would approach the regional mall for an advertising board. But I would try and make that advertising board exciting. And, the typical real estate agency board is, a board full of houses with little prices in the corner and, going for this. And sometimes it's got the price scratched out and then underneath it says now selling for this. I would try and put some humor into it, like, do you need a bargain? Look at me, this type of thing. Everybody likes a bit of humor, or upscaling, I'm your man, this type of thing. Bring that into the advertising, but advertising in regional malls, I think, is going to take off, and it's a great place. If you can get an advertising board outside of the local supermarket or outside of the local Dis-Chem or whatever it is that is being used by frequent shoppers and the majority of shoppers in your area, I would really go for that, and that's good money spent on advertising and marketing. The other thing that I would do is I'm not sure whether the principle of putting boards and properties outside properties is still the norm. But, obviously a face attached to that and a name and something catchy on the board. I find that it's too been there, done that. Contact Jill, so-and-so number. Try and find some humor in there, put a picture of something humorous on your advertising board and say, we're a fun crowd, come in and chat to us. We'd love to have coffee with you.
Just wanted to mention, I think with Mugg Bean, you guys did the marketing on the booms, wasn't it?
That's right. We used, any low cost and economical. So on boom gates at every single shopping mall or building or whatever it is, there's a boom gate there. And what we did is we created the boom sleeve. And the boom sleeve was an advertising sleeve that could go over there. It was very low weight. It wouldn't slide around, and it wouldn't in any way affect the mechanism of the boom. And of course, there is nowhere else you can look going through a boom other than at the boom.
You have to see it. I thought it was brilliant, because you can't help but notice it. It's right there in front of you.
What we did is, we didn't say on the boom sleeve, we also created something humorous. We didn't say, please visit Mugg Bean, blah, 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 blah. We said, looking forward to seeing you again. And, a little bit more lighthearted. And right. I think we could have been more creative, we didn't spit in your coffee, would have been a great one.
Wow. If you can get away, estates. These security estates, if you can get on board, then you can put a sleeve on a security estates boom. I mean, all of that could be wonderful marketing for your brand.
Absolutely. One has to look for innovation, and that was definitely an innovation. It wasn't me that came up with it. It was a guy by the name of Mike Said, and he is around in Joburg, but he is the top marketing guy. He's got such a great sense of humor. He came up with it, and it worked phenomenally for us.
So there's an agent here called Carmen. She mentioned that she used to work for Mugg Bean for 7 years before joining real estate. And she said, something I learned working for Mugg Bean was that you are the face of your brand. Kindness and being great with people, even outside the shop, is important, because people then couple that kindness with your brand. I believe kindness goes a long way in the harsh world we live in. So beautifully said. There's in closing, we're nearly done. I remember when we chatted before the webinar, Mike, you mentioned that you might have a financial plan blueprint that agents can ask you for, right?
I did, and it is available. Drop me a mail and I'll drop you back the template. And you can take the template. The template also has a cash flow added to it underneath. So what it does is it not only records your budget, but it then extends it into cash flow. And you can then see, how it's going to affect your cash coming into your business. So I'll gladly send you the template. If you drop me a mail, there's no cost.
Perfect. I'll get it from you as well. And if people are watching this recording, I will link it below just to make it simpler. There's one lady, CJ, that just asked a quick summary of the 3 parts of the strategic plan in a nutshell.
Yes. The first one is the financial plan. Once you've completed the financial plan, you then look at what I call the strategic plan itself. In other words, what work needs to be done, what effort needs to be put in order to make the financial plan a reality. And the third point is discipline and flexibility. Stick to your strategic plan, and if it's not working, you need to adjust it. So there must be some flexibility. So you need to review it, and I would say quarterly, review it quarterly, and maintain the discipline of sticking to the plan. Those are the 3 parts. I'd like to just close off by saying, I wish you blessings for this year, blessings that you haven't even dreamed of for yourself yet, a bumper year. And the second thing is thank you for the opportunity of sharing today. And then lastly is you can always reach out to me. You have my email, and I'm a business mentor. If you need specific mentorship for your office, I'm available. And believe me, I am economical. My
Yeah.
costs are very, very economical because I don't do it for the money. Really and truly, I do it in order to be able to keep my interaction with people, which I love.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure to work with you. You've been mentoring Lawrence and me for, I think, from about September last year. And it's been invaluable because just getting an outsider point of view and having specific strategic plans where we are held accountable is what we knew we needed. Because between the two of us, we're usually just being busy. But if you don't have an outside perspective and we didn't have you to say, this is what we have in mind, how are we going to get there and be accountable to somebody, then it will all just be wishful thinking and no action. So we're really, really thankful for that.